Welcome to my blog. My mother-in-law visited our home 4 times a week, and each time, she left our refrigerator empty. My husband would say, "She's my mom. What's the big deal if she takes a little food?" The next day, I secretly put something special in the fridge. When my mother-in-law opened it, her face went pale, and the wall clock heavily ticked off the seconds, as if counting the drops of sweat trickling down my face in the stuffy conference room. The quarterly review meeting dragged on for 2 hours longer than planned, draining the last bit of energy from me after an already overloaded workday. My name is Sarah. I'm a nurse at Jude's Medical Center. My job is far from easy, and today, I was especially exhausted. The workday was finally over. I navigated through dense rush-hour traffic with only one thought in my head: a hot, home-cooked dinner and a quiet evening with my husband in our small condo, which we'd only managed to buy by scrimping on everything and taking out a loan. For 3 years of marriage, our life with Michael, my husband, had settled into a routine. We were still paying off a substantial sum to the bank for this condo, in a new development and a car loan, so we always reminded each other that we needed to work hard together. Mike worked for a construction company. His job was also demanding, but he had a passion even stronger than his smartphone games. Often, I felt hurt, but I consoled myself that every man has his hobbies, as long as he remains responsible towards his family. Returning home, I tossed my bag onto the sofa, quickly kicked off my high heels that were tormenting my swollen feet. Mike was sitting there on the sofa, his back to me. Headphones were in his ears. His fingers rapidly glided across the smartphone screen, and from time to time, he muttered quiet curses when his teammates played poorly. The sounds of gunshots and explosions from the game were so deafening that they drowned out my heavy sigh. I was used to this scene. Instead of reproaching him, I silently walked into the kitchen. My stomach was already growling. Yesterday was Sunday, and I'd spent half the day at Safeway, carefully selecting fresh greens and the tenderest beef tenderloin. I'd planned out our menu for the entire week so that when I got home from work, I wouldn't have to rack my brain wondering what to cook. Tonight, I was going to make slow-cooked pot roast with mashed potatoes, a dish Mike loved, and a fresh vegetable salad to go with it. Just thinking about it made half my fatigue evaporate. I happily flung open the refrigerator door, and my smile instantly vanished. Inside, a cold, gaping emptiness greeted me. The chilled food shelf was bare. The container with the beef, which I'd bought yesterday and carefully wrapped in plastic film, was gone. Bags of salad, cherry tomatoes, and cucumbers had also vanished without a trace. Even the carton of milk I'd bought to drink in the mornings was gone. I checked the freezer in dismay. Several salmon fillets I'd cleaned and set aside for baking, and a bag of cleaned shrimp, had also disappeared without saying goodbye. Even the container with leftovers from last night's pilaf, which I'd planned to reheat for lunch at work, was gone. The only things left were a few chicken eggs, forlornly sitting in their tray, and an opened bottle of mineral water. A wave of disappointment and vexation washed over me. This wasn't the first time this had happened. It had almost become an unpleasant tradition in our home. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice from trembling with anger, and walked into the living room. "Honey, why is there nothing in our fridge?" Mike, without taking his eyes off his phone screen, merely shrugged. His hands continued to move. "Oh, Mom probably stopped by. Took some groceries. That's all." His careless reply was like a bucket of cold water poured over my head. I felt my chest tighten. Not because I begrudged a few pieces of meat or bunches of greens, but because of his attitude, because of his blatant disregard for my efforts and my order in our own home. "A little food, you call this a little, Mike? I was just at the grocery store yesterday, bought a week's worth of food, and now there's nothing left. What are we going to eat tonight?" Only then did Mike deign to pause his game. He took off his headphones and looked at me with an irritated expression, as if I had distracted him from something very important. "Well, go buy something for dinner. Some frozen pizza or takeout. Mom just took a little, and you're making such a fuss. Anyone listening would think we're being petty with my own mother." With that, he put his headphones back on, resuming his unfinished battle. The sounds of gunshots boomed again. As if mocking my words, which were swallowed by the silence, I stood rooted in the middle of the living room, staring at my husband's back, and then at the empty kitchen. The cozy dinner I'd dreamed of dissolved into thin air, leaving behind a suffocating emptiness not only in the refrigerator, but also in my soul. That evening, I ate nothing, only drank a glass of water, and went to bed early. The hunger gnawing at my stomach couldn't compare to the disappointment churning in my heart. The next morning, I woke with a dull headache and an empty stomach. Last night, I'd barely slept, tossing and turning, haunted by the image of the empty refrigerator and my husband's indifferent face. Mike slept beside me, breathing evenly. It seemed yesterday's minor quarrel hadn't affected his sleep at all. I quietly got out of bed, not wanting to wake him. Perhaps I simply didn't want to start a new day with another argument. I opened the refrigerator again, as if to confirm that what I'd seen last night wasn't a nightmare. But no, it was still just as empty. I had to take the 2 remaining eggs and fry them, eating them with yesterday's bread. The breakfast of a working woman in a fully equipped home was pathetically meager. As I was getting ready for work, Mike stretched and came out of the bedroom. He yawned widely and headed straight to the kitchen, opening the fridge. "What, nothing for breakfast?" he asked, as if he himself had forgotten the reason for it. My patience, which I'd been holding back since yesterday evening, reached its limit. I slammed my bag onto the table and turned to him. "You're asking me? You should ask your mom. She cleared everything out, didn't she? Don't you remember?" Mike scratched the back of his head. A flicker of embarrassment crossed his face, but he still tried to appear nonchalant. "Yeah, I remember. But why are you so stressed out? I told you yesterday, Mom just took a little bit. We're all family. You're acting like we were robbed." "A little bit," I repeated, my voice beginning to rise. "Mike, do you know how many times a week your mother comes over?" 4 times. Almost every day when I come home from work, I see that half the groceries are gone. And yesterday was the peak. She took everything, leaving not a crumb. Do you understand how I feel? I come home exhausted from work. I want to prepare a delicious dinner for my husband. I open the fridge, and it's empty. This isn't a little bit, this is disrespect. Mike frowned, starting to get annoyed. "What disrespect? She's my mother, and yours too. She worries about us. She's afraid the food will spoil, that we're tired from work and don't have time to cook, so she comes to help. And you talk about disrespect? You should be happy you have such a mother-in-law." Mike's logic made me unsure whether to cry or laugh. Happy? Mom is afraid the food will spoil, so she takes it all home? Mom is afraid we don't have time to cook, so she makes sure we have nothing to cook with. Does that sound logical to you? If Mom really cared, she would at least call and warn us. Instead, she just lets herself into the apartment with her own key, rummages through our things, takes everything as if it's her own home. I feel like I have no personal space in my own house. I gave her a key in case of an emergency. What's wrong with a mother coming to her son's house? Don't think so negatively. I think you're becoming increasingly petty and calculating. Over a couple of pieces of meat and bunches of greens, you won't stop talking about it. Why do I go to work and earn money? So, my wife and children don't want for anything, not for you to count every penny with my mother. Every word Mike uttered was like a knife to my heart. He not only failed to understand my feelings, but also accused me of being petty and calculating. He blindly defended his mother, considering her actions to be self-evident and my dissatisfaction unfounded. It's not about the money, Mike. It's about the behavior. We are a separate family. We need our own personal space. Mom has her own family, her own life. I don't forbid her from visiting, but there must be basic respect. As a daughter-in-law, I try to fulfill my duties, but I cannot tolerate being treated as an outsider, as someone with no say in my own kitchen. All right, I'm tired. I don't want to argue with you. My head hurts already. First thing in the morning, Mike waved his hand, feigning exhaustion. If you don't want to eat, don't. I'll get breakfast somewhere. Let's just drop it. It's not worth ruining the family atmosphere over such trifles. With that, he turned and headed for the exit, leaving me alone with 4 walls and a lump of resentment stuck in my throat. Trifles. For him, they might be trifles, but for me, it was an accumulation of many hurts, many disappointments. This was the last straw, overflowing the cup of my patience. The marriage I had once considered a peaceful haven now seemed like a battlefield where I fought alone for my boundaries, and the enemies, ironically, were those I was supposed to call family. All that day at the clinic, I worked like a programmed robot. My mind was blank. All emotions seemed to have dried up after the morning's fruitless argument with Mike. I couldn't fully concentrate on my work. Images of the empty refrigerator and my husband's words constantly resurfaced in my memory. He called me calculating, petty. Probably, in his eyes and his mother's eyes, I would forever remain an outsider, an ungrateful daughter-in-law. In the evening after work, I didn't go straight home. I aimlessly drove through the city streets without a specific destination. I needed to be in silence to clear my tangled thoughts. Eventually, I stopped at the Lakeside Bean Cafe, chose a secluded corner, and ordered a cup of hot ginger tea. The warmth from the cup warmed my hands, but couldn't warm my chilled soul. What should I do? Continue to silently endure, to maintain this so-called family peace, or continue to argue with Mike, only to hear reproaches and experience pain again? Both paths led to a dead end. I felt helpless and alone. Suddenly, a thought flashed through my mind: the security camera. 6 months ago, there had been several petty break-ins in our gated community. Mike decided to install a small camera in the living room, directly opposite the front door, for peace of mind. Usually, I never paid attention to it, but today, it suddenly became my only hope. I didn't need anyone to believe my words. I needed proof. I needed to see with my own eyes how it all happened, and perhaps I needed to show it to Mike. I hastily paid and drove home. My heart was beating faster than usual. When I reached the condo, Mike wasn't home yet. Perfect. I would have the time and space to carry out my plan. I turned on my laptop and logged into the camera management app. The app allowed me to view recordings for the past 7 days. With trembling hands, I selected yesterday, the day I'd returned from the grocery store and filled the fridge. I rewound the video to the daytime after I left for work and before Mike returned. And then I saw it. Around 3 p.m., the door to our condo opened. My mother-in-law, Carol, walked in. She showed no hint of embarrassment or awkwardness. She entered the house naturally and confidently, as if it were her own home. In her hands was an empty, reusable grocery bag. She didn't rest in the living room or look around. Her goal was clear: the kitchen. She went straight to our large side-by-side refrigerator, which we had saved for so long. She flung open the doors. And although the camera image was black and white, I could still make out the satisfaction on her face at the sight of the full fridge. And then, she began to harvest. She took out the container with the beef, which I had so carefully packed, and put it in her bag. Then the bags of salad, tomatoes, cucumbers. She acted methodically and quickly. Done with the main compartment, she moved to the freezer. The bag of shrimp, the salmon fillets, everything moved, one by one, into her bag. Finally, she even took the container with the leftover pilaf. She left nothing of value. Filling her bag, she cast a glance around the kitchen, and then calmly exited with her haul, carefully closing the door behind her. The entire process took no more than 15 minutes. I sat, numb, before the laptop screen. Although I was mentally prepared, seeing this scene with my own eyes, I couldn't help but feel a bitter taste. This was not the action of a mother who was afraid food would spoil, or who came to help. This was the action of a person who viewed her son and daughter-in-law's home as a free grocery warehouse, from which she could take anything, anytime, without asking, without warning. Her calm, natural behavior hurt me the most. It seemed that in her understanding, this was absolutely normal. This was an inalienable right of a mother-in-law. I saved this video clip to a separate folder on my computer, naming it Evidence. The feeling of powerlessness I had experienced earlier vanished, replaced by a cold determination. I would no longer argue with Mike with words. I would not give him the opportunity to call me petty or a fantasist. I would show him the truth, irrefutably recorded by the very camera he himself had installed. This time, I would not back down. I had to reclaim the respect and boundaries that rightfully belonged to me in my own home. After watching the surveillance video, a strange feeling came over me. It was no longer explosive anger or despair. Instead, a frightening calm took over. Like a patient who had received a definitive diagnosis, I stopped panicking and began to contemplate a treatment plan. Verbal arguments had proven useless. Mike always found an excuse for his mother. Video evidence, though compelling, could be interpreted by him as, "Mom is getting older. Why are you bothering her?" I needed something stronger. Something that could quantitatively measure this recklessness. Something that no one could dispute. I created a new Excel file on my computer. I named it Family Accounting. It sounded dry, but that was exactly what I needed now. Clarity and precision of numbers. I created columns: date, product name, quantity, unit price, notes, and finally, cost. I started with yesterday. I rewound the video again, watching it and meticulously recording. Beef tenderloin. Quantity 1.1 pounds, approx 0.5 kilograms. I remembered the prices. Approximately $12 per pound. Total, $13.20. Cleaned shrimp. Quantity 0.7 pounds, approx 0.3 kilograms. Price around $15. Salmon, salad, cherry tomatoes. I listed everything item by item, omitting nothing. I tried to recall the prices for each item from the receipt. For products whose prices I didn't remember exactly, I searched online grocery store websites to get an approximate figure. I even valued the leftover pilaf, based on the cost of the meat, rice, and my labor. After almost an hour, the table for yesterday was complete. I looked at the grand total at the end, $45.50. Almost $50 for just one haul. This figure surprised even me. This was no longer a little food or a couple of pieces of meat, as Mike had said. This was not a small amount, especially for a young family still paying off loans. But I didn't stop there. I realized that one day was not enough. I needed a complete picture, a prolonged process, to show that this was a systematic phenomenon, not an isolated incident. From this day forward, I decided to become a diligent accountant in my own home. Every time after grocery shopping, I saved the receipt. I photographed the full refrigerator after neatly arranging everything. And every day, upon returning from work, the first thing I did was check the contents of the warehouse. If any product inexplicably disappeared, I immediately entered it into my Excel spreadsheet. I recorded even the smallest details: a few lemons, a couple of onions, a cup of yogurt. Everything was converted into money. This required patience and a cool head. Sometimes, looking at the growing list, I felt a bitter taste. What am I doing? I'm turning my marriage into an inventory of property and my mother-in-law into an object to be wary of. But then I told myself, they put me in this position. If there had been respect from the beginning, if there had been at least one question, one word of gratitude, I would never have had to undertake this heartbreaking task. I decided to carry out my plan in silence. I said nothing to Mike. I behaved as usual, cooked with what was left, cleaned the house. I didn't want to spook the game. I needed enough time to gather a complete dossier. A month, 2, maybe even 3. I would patiently wait until the numbers in my accounting book became large enough to silence those who always considered themselves right. This book was not just proof of monetary losses. It was proof of neglect, intrusion, and my quiet tears throughout this time. It would become my ultimate weapon. My accounting book was filled with new figures. More than a month had passed since I began my plan. Every few days, my mother-in-law would drop by and clear out the fridge. She seemed not to notice the change in my behavior. Or perhaps, she simply didn't care. For her, everything was business as usual, and I, in my role as reluctant accountant, silently recorded everything. The total amount of losses for the first month reached nearly $180. A significant figure. I still didn't show the evidence to Mike. I felt that the time was not yet right. I needed more data, more weight for my future words. But an unexpected event occurred, which multiplied my pain and brought my resolve to a new level. It was a Sunday evening. My mother-in-law called and invited Mike and me for dinner. She said that Lisa, Mike's sister, would be there with her children, and the whole family would gather together. I didn't want to go, but the thought of refusing causing new problems made me agree. The family dinner proceeded in a rather lively atmosphere, at least on the surface. My mother-in-law was merrier than usual today. She constantly piled food onto my husband's and nephew's plates and didn't forget to boast about Mike's achievements. How his boss praised him, how caring he was, how he thought of his parents. I ate in silence, trying not to participate in these conversations. During the conversation, Lisa suddenly bragged about her daughter Mia's new silver bracelet. Mia has been so fussy lately. Mom, they say a silver bracelet helps ward off the evil eye. My mother-in-law looked at the bracelet and snorted disdainfully. Silver is nonsense. Look at this. With these words, she raised her hand, displaying a bracelet of bright green, shiny jade. Michael recently gave this to me. He says it's both classy and good for my health in old age. Only my son understands what his mother needs. Lisa looked at the bracelet, her eyes lighting up. Oh, Mom, how beautiful. That must be worth a couple of $1,000s. My mother-in-law smiled complacently. Her face radiated pride. What, 2,000? You don't know anything about jewelry. Mike said it cost almost 5,000. He feels bad I worked hard my whole life, and he gives me on Wu Bei, in Stanas, in the smaing, asta, Anna, in other way, intelted every pervit. It's times after the process, action tune. It's the sainted. If you are not cap it, accept support, and some of the workers, actually fair it, and a distrance. 18-2. 8 provided. Rate. I Dan. And the daper. I don't ever bide. Entracted. In reason end. Day 1. Action. And is arresting. Axe miting. 1. The braided estoption. Itsauditus. Apps. Iwanis. Informinus. Disgrade. Activated. Act. Not at ost. Tenferments. Action devingsless. And of course, that's exceeded. Action dollars a video. Duan backed it. Access. It's I have it no. And is not made it. And he won. And otter won. And other for those. And for more 5 and. All days. And T live and resigned. It stands. INDAT. And an addis disground. Adarasated. And then I were given. And bicycly. Racketed on red. F is the resh. To stated. Quote. It's not rating out of Ruve. Actually pressed. DN after is. Right? I have the low as a fineling. After instern aiders. And anyone rum. Access. Axma. Tenting. Achin. Out of it. I jiv. This friends and revided. Ivry 4. And that is a velt. Help stand. The reese of the live face is a sepsetted in Trinity. Averpotted. 81. It is body. 1 taknavizested. 1 taknavizested. In the Dsness. And the 6th time. And 7th. Action personed. And thanks for watching. Ags and rapid. Otterly havid. As in of the 25ness. Action. It's not. In life. Apsless. 500 a month for misspending money. Hessays. Mom, buy whatever you want. Don. T skimp on yourself. See what a sonny have. 500. The number rang in my ears when I heard that figure. $500 every month. Mike gave his mother $500 for her spending money every month. I sat numb, chopsticks frozen in my hands, while my husband and I tightened our belts, counting every penny to pay off the mortgage and car loan, while I weighed all the pros and cons every time I went to the grocery store, cutting unnecessary personal expenses. My husband, whom I trusted as someone who shared the financial burden of our family with me, was secretly giving his mother such an enormous sum every month. I looked at Mike. He seemed to flinch slightly when his mother accidentally revealed his secret. He coughed awkwardly, then hastily put a piece of meatloaf on his mother's plate, trying to change the subject. Mom, you're exaggerating. I gave you a modest gift, and you're just bragging. Eat it while it's hot. But it was too late. The words were said, and they struck my trust like a hammer. It turned out that my mother-in-law's generosity in clearing out our refrigerator wasn't just explained by the idea that what belongs to my son is mine. It was reinforced by a solid financial source, secretly provided by my own husband. It turned out that Mike wasn't just condoning his mother's actions, he was their sponsor. He was funding this recklessness. I no longer heard what others were saying. All sounds became muffled. Only the figure $500 echoed in my head. It explained everything. It explained why Mike so blindly defended his mother. It explained why he always considered me petty and calculating. Because in his eyes, the groceries his mother took were nothing compared to the money he gave her. But did he ever think about my feelings? Did he ever think that it wasn't just about the money, but about the lie, about the betrayal? That dinner ended in oppressive silence, at least for me. I pleaded tiredness and asked to leave early. On the way home, I didn't say a word to Mike. He was also silent. He probably realized I had heard everything. Anger and pain intertwined, tearing my chest apart. A new entry appeared in my accounting book. Invisible but the most painful. Trust. Quantity. 0. It was time to have an honest talk with my husband. As soon as the apartment door closed, the silence I had painstakingly maintained all the way home was shattered. I couldn't bear it a second longer. I turned and looked directly into Mike's eyes, which he awkwardly avoided. $500 a month. Yes. My voice sounded dry and unfamiliar, even to myself. Mike flinched, but quickly regained his composure, and even a hint of irritation. You heard what Mom said? Well, Mom always boasts. So, it's true. I gave a bitter laugh, and that laugh was more painful than tears. You give your mom $500 every month for spending money, while we're up to our ears in debt. Does that seem normal to you, Mike? Mike irritably tore off his tie and threw it onto the sofa. What's abnormal about it? I'm giving money to my mother, not a stranger. My parents raised me, educated me for so many years. Now I work. I have money. Helping your parents is natural. As my wife, you should support me. Help? I repeated. I'm not forbidding you from helping your parents, but there are different ways to help. And more importantly, all major family expenses should be discussed between us. Why did you hide this from me? What do you consider me in this house? Just a cook, a dishwasher, who has no right to know about the real financial situation of the family. I didn't want you to worry unnecessarily. Financial matters are a man's concern. Mike continued in his usual patriarchal manner. Besides, if I had told you, would you have agreed? Or would you have started saying that this money should go towards the mortgage or savings and nag me all day? So, you knew I wouldn't agree, and that's why you decided to deceive me? Tears streamed from my eyes. I could no longer hold them back. Mike, do you understand what the problem is? The problem isn't just the $500, it's the trust. You destroyed it. You secretly created a hidden fund. You lied to me. You left me alone to rack my brain over expenses, while you generously showered your mother with an amount equal to half my salary. Is that fair to me? Sensing that he was losing the argument, Mike resorted to personal attacks, a tactic he often used in our quarrels. I see you're becoming increasingly unbearable. An egoist. You only think about yourself. You nitpick with my mother over every trifle. And now you even want to control how I help my mother? My patience ran out. I quickly wiped away my tears, walked to my desk, turned on my computer, and opened the Excel file titled Family Accounting. The screen lit up with rows and figures. I turned the monitor towards him. You say I'm calculating? Fine, then look. This is a detailed statistic of everything your mother took from our refrigerator over the past month and a half. Look at the total sum at the bottom. Nearly $170, Mike, and that's not counting the $330 you give Mom monthly. In total, our small family helps Mom with almost $500 a month. Does that figure suit you? Considering that every month we pay $800 for our mortgage and car loan, Mike froze, staring at the screen. He was stunned by the detail and clarity of the spreadsheet. Numbers don't lie. They exposed the absurdity of the situation that he had tried to cover up with unconvincing arguments for so long. But his silence lasted only a few seconds. Instead of admitting his mistake, he flew into a rage. The rage of a cornered man whose truth had been exposed. What the hell is this? He jabbed his finger at the screen. His voice trembled with anger. You spied on my mother? You recorded every single item. For what? To confront your mother, to reproach your husband. Sarah, this is too much. You're treating my mother like a thief. If she hadn't acted like a thief, I wouldn't have had to do this, I screamed. All my restrained emotions burst forth. How many times have I told you? How many times have I tried to explain how I feel, but did you ever listen? All you know is to defend your mother and call me petty. So I had to speak to you in the language of numbers. Look at the truth. What truth? The truth is, my wife is a vicious woman who counts every penny with her mother-in-law. Mike slammed his hand on the desk, making the computer mouse jump. I can't believe you did this. You've disappointed me so much, Sarah. With that, he turned, grabbed his car keys, and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The loud bang sounded like a period to our conversation and, perhaps, to the last remaining hope within me. I collapsed into my desk chair, staring at the soulless spreadsheet on the screen, and wept again. But this time, not from grief, but from a cruel and clear realization I had lost. All my attempts to compromise, all the evidence, all the arguments had failed to penetrate the wall of his prejudices and blindness. In this war, I was alone, and perhaps it was time to find another path, another tactic, because in a frontal assault, I had suffered a crushing defeat. That night, Mike didn't return. I didn't sleep, sitting alone in the cold living room, staring at the darkened computer screen. The condo seemed enormous and eerily quiet. The silence not only enveloped the space, but also seeped deep into my soul, eroding the last vestiges of my strength. I felt like a small boat in a stormy ocean, without a compass, without an anchor, completely lost and disoriented. Where had I gone wrong? I just wanted to protect our little home. I wanted to be respected in my own house. Was that wrong? The next morning, I took a sick day. I couldn't go to the clinic, looking exhausted and with swollen eyes. I needed to escape these four walls that were pressing down on me. Instinctively, I drove to my mother's house, but as I approached her home, I hesitated. I didn't want my mom to worry. Her health was already delicate, and if she knew about my problems, she would surely lose sleep and appetite. In the end, I turned in another direction and drove to my cousin, Iris. Iris was almost 10 years older than me. She had 2 children and was known for her insight and life experience. She wasn't like other women. She never gave me empty advice like, a fragile peace is better than a righteous fight, or a wife should simply learn to sacrifice. She always went to the root of the problem. Seeing my appearance, she didn't need to ask many questions. She silently made me orange juice and sat me down at the table. I could no longer hide it. All the resentment and bitterness poured out with my tears. I told her everything, about the empty refrigerator, about the accounting book, and about Mike's secret $500. After listening to me, Iris didn't rush to offer comfort. She was silent for a while, tapping her fingers on the table. Her face was thoughtful. Then she slowly and distinctly said, Sarah, your mistake isn't in demanding respect. Your mistake is in choosing the wrong way to achieve it. I looked up at her, not understanding. I made a mistake? But I provided irrefutable evidence. That's precisely why you made a mistake, Iris interrupted me. Do you think Mike doesn't know his mother is wrong? Of course he knows, but on one side is his mother, on the other, his wife. American men, especially those whose mothers pampered them since childhood, who do you think he'll choose? He'll choose the one who doesn't make him lose face. You provided a mountain of evidence. That's like publicly accusing his mother of greed, and him of being a worthless husband who can neither teach his wife nor control his family. His ego was bruised, so instead of solving the problem, he'll attack you to protect his ego and the image of his great mother in his heart. Every word my cousin spoke was like a scalpel, cutting open a truth I was afraid to face. So, what do I do, Iris? Endure forever? Enduring is the worst option. Going head-on, like you just did, is a mediocre option, and it failed. To win, you need to use the best option. Iris took a sip of water. Her eyes sparkled with intelligence. This problem can no longer come from you. If you say it, you'll forever remain the vicious daughter-in-law. You need to make your mother-in-law or Mike himself feel the problem. The problem needs to find them. But how? I still didn't understand. Fight fire with fire, she smirked. She likes to take food from your fridge? Great. Create the conditions for her to do so. But whether she can eat it, that's another question. You have to act strategically, a little more cunningly. Don't turn yourself into a complaining victim. Become the one who sets the pieces on the board. Make her taste the bitter fruit she sowed. Then her eyes will open. And Mike, when his mother stops being the victim of an offended daughter-in-law and becomes the source of problems, he'll understand what to do himself. Iris's advice was like a ray of light in a dark tunnel before me. Indeed, why should I play the role of a miserable wife, crying and begging for understanding? Why couldn't I fight for what was mine myself? My cousin's method seemed cruel, but upon reflection, I realized it was the only way. I was too tired of heart-to-heart talks. It was time for action. I stayed at Iris's for lunch. Even though there were only two of us, I felt warmer than ever. She didn't just give me advice. She gave me strength and a completely new perspective. Leaving her house, I was no longer the Sarah from that morning. My tears had dried, and weakness was replaced by steely resolve. I wouldn't go head-on. I would set a trap, a sweet and unexpected trap, right in my refrigerator. Returning home, I no longer felt overwhelmed. The empty condo now became the perfect place to develop my plan. Iris's words rang in my ears. The problem needs to find them. Fine. I'll deliver the problem right to their doorstep, but in the most appetizing wrapping. I sat down at the table, opened a new notepad, and began compiling a list of special gifts I would prepare for my mother-in-law. My goal was not to harm her health. My knowledge as a nurse wouldn't allow me to do that. The goal was to create such an unpleasant experience that she would remember it forever and, more importantly, couldn't accuse me. My menu gradually took shape. First course and appetizer, a large glass of strawberry milkshake with whipped cream, a dessert that young people love and that looks incredibly tempting. I'd buy it from that popular cafe my mother-in-law once mentioned. See how young people live now, drinking all sorts of delicious things. But inside this sweetness, I would add a secret ingredient, a laxative. I went to CVS and bought an odorless, tasteless powdered laxative. Its action was gentle, but sufficient to cause a very unpleasant visit to the restroom for several hours. I would carefully calculate the dose, enough to cleanse the bowels, but not leading to hospitalization. This would be a blow to her love for trendy treats. The second course main, meatballs in tomato sauce. A familiar, easy to make, and tasty dish. I'd make round, appetizing meatballs with a thick, garlic-scented tomato sauce. No one could resist. But the secret would be inside. I'd buy the hottest chili pepper from the farmer's market, the kind vendors call fire in a bottle, a ghost pepper. I'd mix a large amount of this pepper with the ground meat, then carefully wrap it in a layer of ordinary ground meat. With the first bite, the sweetish taste of the meat and sauce would deceive the taste buds, but the deeper she bit, the more the burning pepper would ignite, scorching her throat. This would be a gift for always taking my meat dishes. The last course dessert, steamed stuffed bell peppers. This is a light, healthy dish for older people, an ideal choice that a caring mother-in-law couldn't ignore. I'd stuff them with meat, as usual, but instead of moderately salting them, I would add an exorbitant amount of salt. The dish would be so salty it would be impossible to swallow. The bitterness of the bell pepper, combined with the saltiness, would create a horrifying symphony in her mouth. This dish was an answer to her self-proclaimed right to care for others' health by taking their food. Having formulated the plan, I immediately put it into action. I went to the grocery store and bought all the necessary ingredients. I also bought plenty of other delicious food, a whole chicken for roasting, pork ribs for grilling, fresh fruits, yogurts. I had to fill the refrigerator, so it looked abundant and appealing, and so my gifts wouldn't seem too suspicious. That evening, Mike still hadn't returned. I didn't call. I had more important things to do. I meticulously prepared each dish. Wearing gloves, I dissolved the laxative powder in the milkshake, stirred it well, and inserted a straw. As usual, I molded the spicy meatballs, trying to hide the bright red filling. I salted the bell peppers, tasting only the tip of my tongue and immediately grimacing and spitting it out. When everything was ready, I arranged them in the refrigerator. The milkshake on the door shelf at eye level, the container with meatballs and the plate of bell peppers on the top shelf, the most visible and accessible spots. Around them, other appetizing dishes, creating a perfect trap. Finished, I stepped back and admired my creation. The refrigerator looked abundant, but for me, it was no longer a symbol of plenty. It was a stage, and I, the director, waited for the leading actress to fall into the trap. A fleeting sense of guilt flickered within me. I was doing something not very nice, but then I remembered Mike's words, shouting in my face, "You're treating my mother like a thief." No, I am not guilty. I am only defending myself in the only way available to me. I gave them a chance to talk like human beings, but they refused. Now, I'll let them talk to their stomachs. The next few days, the atmosphere in the house was oppressive. Mike finally returned late at night, but didn't go to the bedroom. Instead, he took a pillow and slept on the sofa in the living room. We lived under the same roof like strangers, not exchanging a single word. I ate dinner alone. He ate out or ordered food. I didn't care. This silence gave me space to wait for my plan to work. According to my accounting book, my mother-in-law had 2 regular visiting days a week, Tuesday and Friday. Today was Thursday. My heart beat a little faster. Only 1 day left. I tried to maintain a nonchalant demeanor, went to work, came home, cleaned, as if nothing was happening. On Friday morning, I called the clinic and took the afternoon off. Reason: a slight headache. Need to rest. This was part of my plan to create an alibi. I wanted to be sure that when the incident occurred, no one could suspect I was home at the time. After lunch, I didn't go straight home. I went to a small cafe across from our gated community. The cafe had large panoramic windows, looking directly onto the main entrance. I chose a table in the corner, ordered black coffee, and picked up a magazine. I sat, pretending to read, but in reality, my eyes never left the gates on the other side of the road. Time dragged agonizingly slowly. Every minute felt like an eternity. I was worried. What if she doesn't come today? What if my plan fails? Thousands of questions swirled in my head. I had to calm myself, saying that I needed to be patient. A fox, however cunning, will always return to the familiar henhouse. And then, as I had predicted, around 3 p.m., a familiar figure appeared. My mother-in-law, Carol. She wore her colorful coat, and in her hand, her familiar red reusable grocery bag, which I knew so well. She walked unhurriedly, with a nonchalant expression, without the slightest hint of stealth. She swiped her key card at the intercom and calmly entered. My heart tightened. The prey had entered the cage. I looked at the clock, 2:55 p.m. I started counting the time. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I imagined her now in my condo. Opening the refrigerator door, I pictured her joyful face at the sight of the abundance of delicious food. I imagined her unhesitatingly taking the cool strawberry milkshake, the appetizing meatballs, and the healthy bell peppers. Approximately 20 minutes later, the same figure reappeared at the gates. This time, the bag in her hand was noticeably heavier. Despite the distance, I could make out my glass container with the meatballs and the white porcelain plate with the bell peppers. She was carrying several other bags. She looked very pleased, walking briskly and cheerfully. I breathed a sigh of relief, but a mixed feeling rose in my chest. It was the exultation of a victor, mixed with bitterness and a slight fear. I had succeeded. The trap had sprung. But what would happen next, I didn't know. I only knew that I had lit the fuse of an event whose outcome I could not control. I sat in the cafe for almost another hour. I needed to calm down and also reinforce my alibi. I paid and walked unhurriedly home. Opening the door, I entered. The apartment was quiet. I immediately went to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. As expected, the milkshake, meatballs, and bell peppers were gone. Along with them, the roasted chicken and pork ribs I had bought additionally had also disappeared. She had taken not only the bait, but also everything else along the way. I gave a cold, inward chuckle. Tonight, there might be a call, and I was ready to take it. My play was just beginning. Friday evening passed in extraordinary silence. Mike continued to maintain his cold demeanor. He came home, showered, and once again buried himself in his phone, playing games in the living room. I said nothing, silently prepared dinner for myself. The aroma of food filled the kitchen, but the atmosphere between us didn't warm. I ate alone, washed the dishes, and went to my room to read. I tried to look calm, as if I was waiting for something completely ordinary, not the consequences of the traps I had set. Around 11 p.m., when I was already beginning to drift off to sleep, Mike's phone rang piercingly in the living room, breaking the silence. The call was persistent and urgent. I heard Mike mumble something disgruntled, and then his voice as he answered the call. "Hello, Dad? What's wrong? Why are you calling so late? What? What about Mom? In the hospital? How is she in the hospital? What happened to her? Severe stomach pains, vomiting. Yes, I'll be right there." The conversation ended quickly. I heard the chair scrape back with a bang, followed by Mike's hasty footsteps. The bedroom door burst open. Mike stood in the doorway. His face was pale with worry, but his gaze, fixed on me, held suspicion and anger. "Mom was taken to the hospital by ambulance," he said in a strained voice. "She has terrible stomach pains. The vomiting won't stop. Tell me, did you do something?" I jumped out of bed, pressing my hands to my chest, trying to feign extreme astonishment and fear. This was the moment I had rehearsed in my mind all evening. My God, how could this happen? What's wrong with Mom that she had to be taken to the hospital? What did I do? What are you talking about? Don't pretend. Mike stepped closer. His voice became harsh. "Mom came over this afternoon and took some food. She ate it in the evening, and she got sick. Did you put something in the food, Sarah?" I looked him directly in the eyes, trying to keep my gaze as pure and innocent as possible. "What are you talking about, Mike? Are you suspecting me of poisoning your mother-in-law?" I was at work all day. I was tired. I left early, went to a cafe to clear my head, and only came home late in the evening. I didn't see Mom. How would I know when she came or what she took? You should ask Mom if she ate anything else besides our food. My arguments were flawless. My alibi was genuine. He couldn't find fault. "I don't know." Mike grabbed his hair. His face contorted with confusion. But everything just coincided. Why exactly after eating food from our house? I began to counterattack. My voice trembled slightly with indignation. Coincidence? Or did Mom just eat something wrong? The groceries I buy are always fresh. I have the receipts from the grocery store. How could there be anything wrong with them? Or maybe Mom's body just reacted that way. Wait a minute. Why did Mom come over and take food without saying a word to me anyway? I cooked that food for you and me, to our taste. How am I supposed to know if it suits Mom? And now that something has happened, you're blaming me for everything. Do you still consider me your wife? My words hit his weak spot. The fact that his mother had taken food without permission was an undeniable fact, and it was wrong. Mike had no answer. The suspicion in his eyes still remained, but it wavered under the pressure of my logical words and the illogicality of his mother's actions. "Fine. I don't want to argue with you now." He turned away, hastily grabbed his jacket and keys. "I need to go to the hospital to see Mom. We'll continue this conversation later." With that, he rushed out the door. The door slammed shut again with a bang. I collapsed onto the bed. My heart pounded. The first act of the play had been successful, but I knew this was just the beginning. The real storm was yet to come, and I needed to steel myself to face it. Mike left, and silence once again fell over the condo. But this time, it didn't scare me. On the contrary, adrenaline coursed through my body, keeping me awake. The first step had succeeded. I had sown doubt in his ironclad certainty. I had forced him to confront the fact that his mother's actions were not always right and not always harmless. I couldn't sleep. I walked around the room, replaying the words and arguments over and over in my head. I knew tomorrow would be a difficult day. There would surely be an official interrogation. I needed to prepare meticulously to avoid the slightest blunder. The next morning, I woke up early as usual and started getting ready for work. I chose a modest business suit, applied light makeup to conceal the dark circles under my eyes from the sleepless night. I wanted to appear calm, dignified, like someone who had nothing to fear or hide. Around 8 a.m., as I was having breakfast, Mike returned. He looked terribly exhausted. Unshaven, in wrinkled clothes, he had obviously spent the entire night at the hospital. He didn't look at me, silently walked into the bedroom, grabbed some clothes, and went to the bathroom. When Mike came out, I spoke first, with emphasized concern in my voice. "How is Mom, honey? What did the doctors say?" Mike sat on the chair opposite me. His face showed fatigue, acute gastritis. The doctor said it was due to something highly irritating to the stomach. "She's better now, but they're keeping her for observation." "Oh, thank God it wasn't food poisoning," I exhaled with relief. A perfect performance. Mom probably ate something too spicy or salty. Older people have weaker digestive systems. One needs to be more careful. Mike stared at me for a long time with a testing gaze. The doctor asked what she ate. Mom said she ate the meatballs and stuffed bell peppers she took from us. My eyes widened in surprise. Meatballs and bell peppers? Oh yes, that's right. I cooked those the day before yesterday. I planned for us to eat them last night. I added a bit more pepper to the meatballs because you'd been complaining lately that the food was bland. And I accidentally oversalted the bell peppers. I was just about to throw them out but didn't get a chance. Who would have thought Mom would take precisely those? Poor Mom. I told all this so naturally that every detail seemed laughably logical. I cook for my husband. To my husband's taste, that's normal. I spoiled a dish. That's also normal. All the abnormality of the situation stemmed from my mother-in-law's unauthorized action. Added more pepper. Accidentally oversalted. Mike frowned. Suspicion flared up again. "Are you sure it was an accident, Sarah?" I put down my fork, looked up, and met his gaze directly. This time, my eyes held not just innocence, but deep resentment. "Mike, maybe that's enough?" "I already said, I didn't do anything. If you don't believe me, that's your business. But think about it yourself. If I really wanted to harm your mother, would I do it in such an obvious way? I work in medicine. I know perfectly well how to harm someone without leaving a trace. But I would never commit such a sin." I stood up. My voice became firm and resolute, and I'll tell you something else, so you know. The food in this house is bought with my money, cooked with my effort. It is my property. Your mother entered our home without permission and took it without asking. That is already wrong. Now, if something happened after that, it's a risk she has to bear herself. I am not obliged to cook to your mother's taste. And I am certainly not responsible for the safety of something she took without permission. Tell that to your mother. From this day forward, if she wants to eat what I cook, let her visit properly. I will welcome her. But this style of entering the house like a free supermarket, I will not tolerate anymore. With that, I took my bag and, turning, left for work, not giving him a chance to say a word in response. I knew my words were harsh, but they were necessary. I had to clearly and decisively establish boundaries. The act of innocence was over. It was time for direct confrontation, but this time, I was in a completely different position. I was no longer the weaker party demanding justice. I was the mistress of my own home, and I had the right to set the rules. I knew that my morning declaration of war would not end peacefully. And, as I had predicted, the storm broke sooner than I thought. The next day evening, when I had just returned from work, Mike was already waiting for me in the living room. His face was very tense. Without even letting me put down my bag, he said, "Mom and Lisa are coming over now." I merely shrugged, remaining calm. "Let them come. I also want to clarify everything once and for all." Approximately 15 minutes later, the doorbell rang, not the sound of a key opening the door. Evidently after the incident, my mother-in-law no longer dared such self-initiated entries. Mike went to open the door. My mother-in-law, Carol, and sister-in-law, Lisa, entered. Carol still looked a bit pale after the hospital stay, but her gaze, fixed on me, was spitting fire. And there was no need to speak of Lisa. She had always been her mother's loudest mouthpiece and closest ally in all their battles. They didn't even greet me. Lisa walked directly up to me and pointed a finger in my face. You're nothing but a venomous snake. What did my mother ever do to you that you would resort to such treachery? Is there anything human left in you?" I took a step back, avoiding her finger. Watch your words. What treachery have I committed now? Are you still denying it? Lisa shrieked. You deliberately made spicy, oversalted food and left it in the fridge so my mother would eat it. She was in the hospital for several days. Do you even know that? The earth shouldn't bear a daughter-in-law like you. Then Carol also spoke, in a weak but resentful tone, as if she were the most unfortunate victim in the world. Sarah, I never thought you'd do such a thing to me. I only wanted to help. I thought you two were tired from work. I stopped by to tidy up, saw the food, and took it to share with your father. It was just food. Why are you being so petty? And then to cause me such harm. She began to sob, wiping away tears. Their performance was flawless. If this were my old self, I would probably have been frightened, flustered, and started apologizing. But not now. I knew these tricks too well. I looked at Mike. He stood silently, head bowed, not saying a word. His silence was tantamount to agreement with his mother and sister. I knew that in this battle, I was still alone. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm and clear. First, I apologized that Mom had to go to the hospital. In any case, what happened was something no one wanted. Hearing my apology, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law seemed to triumph. Lisa smirked. Admitting guilt is good. Now, get on your knees and apologize to Mom. But I continued. My voice grew firmer. I apologize for the consequences, but I do not admit guilt for the causes. Allow me to ask, Mom, before taking food from our refrigerator, did you once call me to ask for permission? Carol was flustered and couldn't answer. I continued. Allow me to ask, Lisa, if your neighbor let herself into your apartment with her own key, rummaged through your refrigerator, and took food, would you consider that normal? Lisa froze, her face reddening. You don't compare incomparable things. This is my mother-in-law, not a stranger. Oh, really? So, a mother-in-law has the right to invade her daughter-in-law's personal space? Has the right to take her belongings without asking? I turned and looked directly at my mother-in-law. Mom, I told Mike many times, I don't begrudge you food, but I cannot accept your behavior. I feel disrespected in my own home. This kitchen is mine. This refrigerator is mine. Everything in it is bought with my money and prepared with my effort. You cannot consider it yours. Carol trembled with anger. How dare you speak like that? This house belongs to my son, so everything in the house belongs to him. I took my son's things. What's wrong with that? This house indeed partially belongs to Mike, but it also belongs to me. We took out a loan together to buy it. We pay it off together. I also work. I also earn money. I am not a freeloader in this house. I cut in. And I repeat. I cooked the food for my husband, to his taste. He likes spicy food. I cook spicy. I spoiled a dish. I made it salty. I am not obliged to report to you about it. You took the food without permission. You ate it without permission. Now that something has happened, that's a risk you must bear yourself. You're just rude. Lisa lunged at me again, raising her hand to slap me, but Mike managed to restrain her. This was it. The decisive moment had arrived. I calmly walked to my desk, picked up the pre-prepared folder of documents. I placed it on the coffee table in front of everyone. The gentle thud of the folder against the glass surface sounded in the tense silence of the living room, clear and resolute. All eyes turned to it. Mom and Lisa say I'm calculating that I harmed Mom. Fine. Today, we're going to speak the language of evidence, the language of clear numbers. I opened the first page. It was a printout of that very Excel file, family accounting, which I had secretly kept for the past 3 months. Rows, figures, everything was neatly formatted with details down to every onion and chili pepper. This is the statistics of all the groceries that have disappeared from our refrigerator over the past 3 months, from July 15th to October 16th, I said in a calm, dispassionate voice. I recorded all the dates, names, quantities, and approximate cost of each product based on the grocery store receipts I saved. I pointed to the grand total, highlighted in bold at the end of the last page. The total cost of the little bit Mom took over 3 months amounts to $247.95. Let's round that up to 250. In the commonest, 2000 said. And 18, Apatis. And Timene. Actions different. Axero. He. Adder. 250. The figure, 250, sounded like a clap of thunder. Lisa gaped, unable to utter a word. Carol's face went pale, her lips moved, but no sound came out. Both of them, probably, had never imagined that their harmless taking a little food could amount to such a colossal sum. I turned to the next section of documents. If Mom and Lisa think I made it all up, here's additional evidence. I spread a series of clear, color printouts of screenshots on the table. These are frames from the living room security camera. Here's 2:47 p.m., Tuesday, July 18th. Mom enters the house and takes a package of pork ribs and 2 yogurts. And here's 3:10 p.m., Friday, July 28th. Mom takes a whole fish and a bag of oranges. I flipped through the images one by one, clearly stating the date, time, and corresponding products, which perfectly matched my table. Every image, every word of mine, was like an invisible slap to both of them. Their faces changed from pale to crimson, from shame and anger. Finally, I reached the last document. I looked directly at Mike, who had stood rooted the entire time. And that's not all, folks. These $250? That's not even all the help our small family has given Mom. Because, as far as I know, every month, my husband, Michael, secretly gave Mom an additional Wubai, represang. Fine it is video. Innovated. Is not mine. STO. And pariations. Offer. Accessed event. And I did. God 9. And the Winton the rhyme. Actually 10. 8. Axiva. 18. 141. 10 for. And ones they were presents. And of action. Askanize. Actually robberies. In the videos. Accessed. It is my. It's take the redded. Actually. App says. Addist. And everyone. Ni. Heat action. Inber said. Accessed. It's the said action. And description. Technigraded. And. It's engistenrally. Ingrasted. And allided. It's time in living. Replicated. Tacated 2000. Aver the story is less. Downid. Accident. In his all team. In a day. And ever. It's of happened. In ever. It's timely oniclize. And actions. Double free. Explainly. Dynavan. Read axis. Expression to the telber. In the stanger on the moderdid. Adis of course. IA. S. 2. Airy. And Dr. is S. 10 everybody. After A. 1242. Airy Tines. I everyone treated round. I everyone treated round. It's not metarated. And integrated. Action littles. It's a metaration. And how bit of videos. Asks place. 194.20. And that's of difference. It's really one back. Honest. Action times in wrote. Aturively from bearing. And tenu. And ravided. When 9. I am devire y. It's eterestus. Eniday. Axless. Absolute. 500 for her spending money. This time, Lisa was also stunned. She sharply turned to Mike and her mother. 500 a month? Is that true, Mom? Why didn't I know about this? Carol awkwardly lowered her head, not daring to look at anyone, and Mike went white as a sheet. He hadn't expected me to reveal this secret to his sister. The atmosphere in the room grew thick. The victim performance had completely failed in the face of irrefutable evidence. I straightened up, crossed my arms, looked at the 3 of them, and delivered the decisive blow. Mom says I intentionally poisoned her. My sister says I'm a venomous snake. Fine. I suggest we all go to the nearest police department and report what happened. I picked up the folder. My voice was icy. I will hand over this entire accounting book, as well as all the surveillance camera recordings for the past 3 months. Let the police conduct an investigation. First, to find out if I actually poisoned Mom. Second, to find out if the actions of unlawfully entering another's dwelling and stealing property, totaling nearly $250 over 3 months, constitute a crime under the statutes of unlawful entry and theft. How does that sound? My words exploded like a bomb. police, theft. These were words they never expected to hear. Carol trembled all over. Not from weakness, but from fear. All the color drained from Lisa's face. She could curse loudly, but facing the law, that was an entirely different matter. A dead silence fell over the room. No one dared to say a word. Silence was the answer. After a long time, Carol, swaying, stood up, not daring to look at me. All right, I'm tired. Let's go home, daughter." Lisa hastily supported her mother, throwing a scorching glance at me, but said nothing. The two of them trudged dejectedly towards the exit, hastily and miserably. The door closed. Only Mike and I remained in the living room. He stood, frozen, looking at me as if I were a stranger. His usual strength, confidence, and patriarchal demeanor had vanished without a trace. Instead, there was bewilderment, embarrassment, and perhaps a little fear. The battle was over, and this time, I was the victor. This grand confrontation didn't bring an immediate resolution. Instead, it opened a period of Cold War that was more terrifying than any quarrels. Our home plunged into an oppressive silence. Mike stopped sleeping on the sofa. He returned to the bedroom, but we lay at a vast distance from each other. Backs turned, without a single word, without a single touch. He didn't dare to look me in the eyes. Perhaps for the first time in his life, he was afraid of his wife. I understood that we couldn't live like this forever. This lull was temporary. I needed to take more decisive action to permanently assert my boundaries. I didn't want our refrigerator to become the center of future wars again. On Monday morning, I called a used appliance reseller. In the afternoon, the movers arrived. As two workers struggled to carry our huge side-by-side refrigerator out of the kitchen, Mike returned from work. He froze in the doorway, staring in astonishment at what was happening. What are you doing?" he stammered. "Selling it," I replied nonchalantly, signing the papers. "This refrigerator is too big. It causes too many problems. I don't need it anymore." After the movers left, the kitchen felt strangely empty. Mike still stood there with a disbelieving expression on his face. He probably thought I was just being spiteful, but my actions showed something entirely different. I wasn't joking anymore. The next day, I ordered a mini fridge online, one of those tiny ones you typically find in hotel rooms. It came up to my waist. Inside, there was only enough room for a few yogurts, some fruit, and a bottle of water. When the refrigerator was delivered, I unpacked it myself and placed it in the corner of the kitchen where the giant had once stood. I turned to Mike and said in a calm but clear voice, "From this day forward, this refrigerator is only big enough for me. If you want to eat, if you want to store groceries, please take care of it yourself." It was a declaration that I would take care of myself. I no longer had the obligation to worry about his meals. Our shared life, which had begun in the kitchen, was officially divided. But my actions didn't end there. The underlying problem wasn't the refrigerator, it was our marriage. I realized that I couldn't continue to live with a husband who didn't respect me, didn't protect me, and always put his mother above everything else. I needed to understand where I stood in this relationship and what my options were. I began searching online for law firms specializing in family law. I chose one that looked reputable in a downtown office building and scheduled a consultation. On the appointed day, I took the afternoon off. Sitting in the waiting room of the law firm, I felt confused. I never thought I'd find myself in such a place. But when I met the female lawyer, her calmness and professionalism reassured me. I told her my entire story without holding back. She listened attentively, occasionally making notes. She thoroughly advised me on my rights in case of divorce, on the division of joint property like the condo and car, on bank loans, and on the procedure and timeline. The conversation lasted more than an hour. When I left the office, I felt a clarity in my mind. I hadn't decided to divorce immediately, but knowing that I had an option, that I had the right to decide my own fate, gave me immense strength. I had no idea that my visit had been accidentally noticed. That same day, at the office, a colleague approached Mike and clapped him on the shoulder. "Hey, Mike, I had lunch with clients at Executive Towers Plaza today. I think I saw your wife. Looks just like her. She had some business there." Mike initially didn't give it much thought, but when his colleague added, That building is full of law firms and financial companies. His heart sank. A feeling of anxiety and panicked fear engulfed him. Sold the fridge, and now a law firm. All my actions pointed to one thing: the end. That evening, for the first time in many days of silence, Mike spoke to me. He stood before me. There was no usual self-confidence in his voice, only a tremor. "Sarah, were you at a lawyer's?" "Yes." I didn't deny it, just looked at him coldly. "Yes. Are you really going to get a divorce?" There was horror in his eyes. "I just wanted to know my rights," I replied dispassionately. "I need to know how to protect myself." Perhaps our future conversations would be better conducted through lawyers. With that, I turned and went into the bedroom, closing the door behind me and leaving him alone in the living room with growing fear. He began to understand that he might truly lose me. In the following days, Mike lived in fear. He awkwardly tried to atone for his guilt, buying breakfast and bringing it home, but I was already preparing my own meals. He cleaned the condo, did laundry things he had never done before. But I maintained a cold distance. Trust, once shattered, is not so easily mended by a few small gestures. I needed to see real internal changes, not desperate attempts dictated by fear. Our Cold War might have continued even longer if not for a sudden event that shattered all plans, all resentments, and forced us to confront a much harsher reality. It was a Saturday evening, around 10 p.m. I was reading in the room when Mike's phone rang. He was in the shower, so I glanced at the screen. Lisa was calling. I didn't pay attention, but the phone rang incessantly, persistently, and anxiously. Intuition told me something was wrong. I grabbed the phone and rushed to the bathroom door. "Honey, Lisa's calling. It sounds urgent." Mike hastily rushed out, wrapped in a towel, with wet hands. As soon as he put the phone to his ear, his face drastically changed. It became deathly pale. His eyes widened in terror. "What? What about Dad? Where is he?" "Ambulance." "Which hospital?" "I'll be right there." He dropped the phone. It fell to the floor with a dull thud. He looked at me, his lips trembling. He couldn't utter a word. "What happened?" I asked, concerned. "Dad, he fell in the bathroom. Mom says he clutched his chest, cried out in pain, and lost consciousness. Lisa is taking him to the hospital by ambulance." Mike's voice broke with fear. Without a second's hesitation, I said, "Get dressed quickly." "Which hospital?" "I'll drive." Panic had deprived Mike of his ability to think straight. He could only stammer the name of the hospital nearest his parents' house. We rushed out of the house. All the way to the hospital, Mike sat in the passenger seat, clutching his head in his hands, trembling all over. He constantly mumbled, "What do we do, Sarah? If something happens to Dad?" I gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to remain calm. As a medical professional, I knew how dangerous such symptoms were. "Calm down. We'll get there and figure it out. Panic won't help now." When we rushed into the emergency room, a chaotic scene greeted us. Lisa was sobbing, clinging to the on-call doctor's arm. Carol sat on a bench, slumped, with an empty, lifeless gaze. Several relatives, who had been informed of the incident, were also there, but all they could do was helplessly watch. The air was thick with the smell of antiseptics and fear. The entire family, these people who had always seemed so strong and authoritative, were now completely broken. I took a deep breath, pushing aside all personal emotions. In that moment, I was not Sarah, the daughter-in-law with a conflict with her husband's family. I was Sarah, the nurse. Professionalism and composure, honed over years, took over. I quickly approached the on-call doctor, pushing Lisa aside. "Hello, doctor. I'm Sarah, the patient's daughter-in-law. I work at St. Jude's Medical Center. Can you please tell me my father-in-law's condition?" Hearing my clear and professional tone, the young doctor seemed to calm down slightly. He turned to me. "The patient arrived in cardiac arrest. We performed resuscitation, and his heart is beating again, but his condition remains extremely critical. Preliminary diagnosis: severe heart attack, ST segment elevation, myocardial infarction, or STEMI. We need to urgently perform examinations and intervention." Severe heart attack. These words struck like a hammer. Mike and Lisa, hearing them, panicked even more. But I knew what to do. Time was of the essence. Please show me the ECG and the first results of the enzyme tests, I requested. A quick glance at the readings told me the situation was worse than I thought. Do you have a 24/7 cardiac catheterization lab at this hospital? The patient needs immediate coronary stenting. The on-call doctor hesitated. Our team is currently on another operation. We might have to wait. Waiting is not an option. I sharply interrupted him. I turned to Mike. Give me your phone. Without the slightest hesitation, I scrolled through the contacts and found a number saved as Dr. Miller, head of cardiology. He was one of the leading specialists in interventional cardiology in the city, a teacher I respected immensely. I had been fortunate enough to get his number at a conference. A calm, deep voice answered on the other end of the line. Hello? Dr. Miller, hello, this is Sarah. I'm a nurse. I apologize for bothering you at this hour, but my father-in-law is in critical condition. A severe heart attack with ST segment elevation, it's very serious. The district hospital is overwhelmed. I'm afraid they won't be able to perform the intervention in time. Can I transfer him to your facility right now? I beg you, save him. I laid out the situation concisely, clearly, and desperately. Dr. Miller was silent for a few seconds, then said, All right, bring him directly to the emergency room at City General Hospital. Tell them I sent you. I'll arrange for a team to be ready. Yes, thank you, Professor. I'm immensely grateful. I hung up and turned to the on-call doctor. We're transferring him to another hospital. Dr. Miller from City General Hospital is already aware and is preparing an operating room. Everyone in the emergency room stared at me in astonishment. The on-call doctor was also surprised, but quickly nodded and helped with the transfer paperwork. I turned to the bewildered family. Mom, Lisa, Mike, listen to me. We're transferring Dad to City General Hospital right now. They have the best doctors there. They will save him. I'll take care of all the paperwork. Lisa, call the relatives. Tell them to go straight there. Mike, you'll go in the ambulance with Dad. Most importantly, stay calm, support him. Mom, you mustn't worry. You'll ride with me in the car. Everything will be fine. My voice was quiet, but it carried confidence and strength. In this storm of panic and fear, I suddenly became the only beacon. My mother-in-law, the woman who had always looked down on me, now looked at me with tear-filled eyes, full of trust and hope. She nodded tremulously. Lisa also stopped making sarcastic remarks and obediently did what I said. Mike looked at me with a gaze full of mixed feelings that I couldn't decipher. There was surprise, gratitude, admiration, and, above all, the deepest remorse. He realized for the first time that the wife he had despised, the one he had pushed away, was the only person capable of navigating the family ship through this storm. He realized my true, indispensable value. The race against death had begun. The ambulance, siren blaring, sped through the quiet, hazy night of the city. I drove behind it. My mother-in-law sat beside me. She was no longer crying, just silently clasping her hands in prayer. At City General Hospital, as Dr. Miller had promised, everything was ready. My father-in-law was immediately taken to the operating room. The operating room door closed, separating life from death. We sat on benches in the hallway. Time seemed to stand still. Every second stretched like an eternity. My mother-in-law and Lisa huddled in a corner, sobbing occasionally. Mike paced back and forth in front of the door. His face was gaunt, his eyes red. He didn't dare to look at me, but I knew he was watching my every move. I was the only one who remained calm. I went to get water for everyone, reminded my mother-in-law to take her blood pressure pills. From time to time, I went into the doctor's lounge to inquire about the progress of the operation from my colleagues. My familiarity with the hospital environment and medical procedures made me the only liaison for the entire family. After more than 2 hours, the operating room door opened. Dr. Miller came out, removing his mask. He looked tired, but there was relief in his eyes. The operation was successful. The patient is out of danger. We installed a stent and restored the patency of a completely blocked artery. Fortunately, you arrived in time. A little longer, and the outcome could have been tragic. We all collectively exhaled. My mother-in-law and Lisa hugged and burst into tears. But this time, they were tears of joy. Mike sank to his knees, his hands on the floor. His shoulders shook with sobs. After my father-in-law was moved to the ICU and everything had calmed down a bit, I found a quiet corner in the hallway to catch my breath. These few hours of tension had exhausted me to my limit. Suddenly, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was Mike calling. I was surprised, as he was only a few dozen feet away from me. I hesitated for a moment but still answered. "Hello?" On the other end of the line, Mike's voice broke with sobs. He was crying. This strong, self-confident man was crying like a child. "I'm sorry," he choked out through his tears. "I was wrong, Sarah. I was terribly wrong. I was a bad husband, a worthless son. I didn't appreciate you. I let my selfishness and blindness hurt you." I listened in silence, my heart suddenly constricted with pain. Today, if it hadn't been for you, I don't know what would have happened. My father, our whole family. You saved everyone, while we all panicked like helpless children. You were the only one who took everything into her hands. I saw everything. I understood everything. I don't deserve to be your husband. My tears began to fall. Tears of resentment, held back for so long. "Sarah, please, don't leave me, okay?" His voice was full of despair. "Please, give me a chance. Just one chance, so I can fix all my mistakes. I promise, I will change. I will become a husband worthy of you. Please, don't divorce me. I can't lose you." I didn't answer, just stood there and cried. My crying and his crying mingled on the phone in the middle of the cold hospital corridor. For the first time, I felt his sincere remorse. The icy wall I had built around my heart seemed to begin to crack. In the following days, the hospital became our second home. My father-in-law was recovering at an astonishing rate. He was transferred from the ICU to a regular room for further observation. The crisis, it seemed, had purged the family of all conflicts and resentments. There were no more reproaches, no more judgmental glances. Instead, there was care and mutual support. My mother-in-law completely changed. There was no longer any arrogance or complacency in her. She silently cared for her husband, and every time I came, her gaze was full of gratitude and a certain shame. Lisa also stopped being caustic. She often asked me about her father's vitals, about his diet, fully trusting my professionalism. There's no need to mention Mike. He was on duty at the hospital, almost around the clock. He learned to measure blood pressure, to record medication times. But most importantly, he showed special care for me. He made sure I ate on time, sent me home to rest when he saw I was tired. Every time he looked at me, his eyes were full of remorse and love. His tearful plea that night still echoed in my ears, but I didn't answer. I needed time. I needed to see real actions. Approximately a week later, when my father-in-law's condition had stabilized, I realized it was time for a conversation. Not to rake over the past, but to build a new future, a new order for the entire family. I told Mike about my intentions, and he fully supported me. The family meeting took place not at home, but in a quiet corner of the hospital cafe. Just the four of us, me, Mike, Carol, and Lisa. Mike started the conversation. He didn't beat around the bush, but went straight to the point. He stood up and bowed to me and his mother. "Mom, Sarah, forgive me. I was a bad son and a bad husband." His voice was sincere and firm. I was too insensitive and selfish. Because of my ego and blindness, I condoned wrong things, hurt my wife, and almost destroyed our family. I also apologized to Mom for my way of helping being wrong and only creating new conflicts. He turned to me. "Sarah, I know 1,000 apologies aren't enough, but I sincerely hope you'll give me a chance to make amends, to prove everything with actions." Carol sobbed. Her husband's illness and her son's sudden maturity had left her speechless. Then I calmly spoke. "The past is in the past. Let's not return to it. Right now, the most important thing is Dad's health and how our family can live in harmony and respect for each other in the future." Mike and I discussed it, and we have a proposal. I hope Mom and Lisa will listen. All eyes were on me. Dad has just suffered a severe illness. He needs care in a calm, clean, and more comfortable environment. The old house, though full of memories, is run down, and there's no elevator, which will be very inconvenient for Dad. Therefore, My husband and I propose helping our parents rent a condo in a new development nearby. Lisa was about to object, but I continued. I know you might think about living together, but I believe we all need personal space for our parents to rest and recover. For my husband and me, to build our own home. Living nearby will allow us to conveniently visit and care for our parents. Moreover, the gated community we looked at has a community senior center with many clubs and activities. I think Mom will find a new environment for socializing there, new friends, new joys, instead of sitting at home and worrying about her children and grandchildren. Every word I spoke was logical and reasonable, without the slightest hint of reproach or revenge. Everything stemmed from sincere concern for Dad's health and the future of the entire family. Carol looked up at me, her eyes full of tears. She understood. She understood that I wasn't trying to push her away, but, on the contrary, was opening a new life, a new path for her. She also realized that her excessive concern for our small family actually stemmed from loneliness, from a lack of other joys in her life. After a long silence, she quietly nodded. Mom agrees. Do as you see fit. I trust Sarah. Her words, I trust Sarah, became a reconciliation. All walls of prejudice crumbled. Lisa also had no reason to object. A new agreement, a new order, was established not through coercion or arguments, but through understanding and love. A month later, my father-in-law was discharged from the hospital. As planned, we found them a bright and cozy 2-bedroom condo in a new gated community just minutes from our home. Mike completely kept his promise. All expenses for rent and the purchase of new furniture he openly discussed with me. He no longer made any financial decisions alone. We furnished the new condo for his parents together, like newlyweds building their nest. On the day the parents moved in, the whole family gathered. The condo wasn't very large, but had all the amenities, with a balcony where they could grow flowers and fresh air. My father-in-law sat in a new armchair, looking at the landscape outside the window, his face rosy and content. But most of all, Carol had changed. At first, she was a little unaccustomed to the new environment, but I didn't give her time to feel lonely. The very next day, under the pretext of asking her to teach me how to cook a certain dish, I accidentally led her to the community senior center in their complex. It was a lively public space. Older men played chess, read newspapers. Women did gymnastics, danced. Laughter and conversations resounded everywhere. I showed Mom the senior glee club, which was practicing classic American folk songs. My mother-in-law's eyes lit up. I knew she used to be a well-known activist in her community. Mom, maybe you'd like to participate. For your soul, sitting alone at home is boring. I think everyone here is so cheerful and friendly, I gently suggested. As if hitting the mark, my mother-in-law was a little embarrassed, but then she nodded. Just a few days later, she became an active member of the choir. But she didn't stop there, also enrolling in cooking classes. Her life seemed to begin a new chapter. She no longer had time to think about what her son and daughter-in-law were eating today. Her time was now filled with rehearsals, cooking lessons, gatherings with new friends. She became surprisingly cheerful and vibrant. Sometimes she called us not to check up on us, but to brag about how their choir was praised or what delicious dessert she had learned to bake. She even sent photos to the family chat. There she was in a fancy dress, beaming, standing on stage at a Senior Appreciation Day concert. Her transformation positively affected the entire family. The atmosphere was no longer tense. Every weekend, my husband, Lisa's family, and I would visit the parents for dinner. Dinner was no longer a place for bragging or comparisons, but a truly warm family gathering. My mother-in-law cooked new dishes, happily told stories about her friends. She no longer interfered in our lives because she had found joy and meaning in her own. 3 months after that fateful family meeting, everything had fundamentally changed. Winter had arrived, bringing cold winds, but in our small home, it was warmer than ever. Mike had truly changed. He stopped being a man obsessed with games and indifferent to his wife. He became a responsible, caring, and responsive husband. He returned home from work on time, helped me in the kitchen, washed the dishes. We talked every day about everything, from work to future plans. Trust and respect returned, becoming even stronger than before. One Saturday afternoon, as I was cleaning, Mike unexpectedly returned home with two couriers. They were carrying something large, packaged in cardboard. "What is it?" I asked, surprised. Mike just smiled mysteriously. "A gift for you." When the cardboard packaging was removed, I froze. It was a brand new, silver side-by-side refrigerator, sleek and even more beautiful than the one I'd sold. I looked at him with tears in my eyes. Mike came up to me and gently hugged me. "I bought it to replace that mini fridge. Our home can't have an empty refrigerator, but from this day forward, we'll fill it together." "Okay, darling." He gently kissed me on the lips and pulled out a bouquet of red roses from behind his back. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for giving our family a new start." That evening, we went to Safeway together. The cart was overflowing with fresh groceries. Grocery shopping ceased to be my chore and became a shared joy. Returning home, we arranged the groceries in the new refrigerator together. Shelf by shelf, it filled not only with food but also with love and hope. That evening, our family had a true celebratory dinner. My husband's parents and Lisa's family came. Dad looked healthy and vigorous. My mother-in-law brought pastries she had baked herself in her cooking classes and told cheerful stories non-stop. The atmosphere was warm, filled with laughter. When dinner ended, I opened the brand new refrigerator to get fruit for dessert. The light from inside illuminated the colorful products, neatly arranged on the shelves. I involuntarily smiled. The refrigerator, which had once been the source of so many conflicts and tears, now became a symbol of a new beginning. A beginning full of understanding, respect, and love.